from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Friday night edition of the program. We're live, we're national, and our phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And guess what? Surprise, surprise, job growth is weaker than expected in August. No me diga, don't tell me. How could that be? Just like prior months, it's been revised downward yet again. I know, to everybody's chagrin, shock and awe. The U.S. added 142,000 jobs in August. Earlier months were revised down. Manufacturing jobs have crashed. U.S. job growth was significantly weaker than expected in the August report, and job growth in prior months was revised down. That was a huge deal. We saw the other day nearly 1 million jobs, suggesting that the labor market is even weaker than it already looked. The economy added, like I said, 142,000 jobs for August. The prior month's job estimate was revised down from 114,000 jobs to 89,000 jobs. And the June figure was revised down by 60,000 to just 118,000. The unemployment rate did go down by 0.1% from 4.2% to 4.3% in July. The labor force participation rate remained at 62.7%, where it's been for about a year. Average hourly earnings for all employees on private non-farm payroll increased by 14 cents, or 0.4%, to $35.21. Over the past year, average hourly earnings have increased by 3.8%. This was higher than expected. So there you go. Some people are making a few dollars more per hour, and there's a whole lot of people that just don't have a job. Which is, honestly, that was the entire argument for when they said, if you try to raise the minimum wage, a few people are going to make a few bucks more, and a bunch of people are going to lose jobs. Private sector payrolls grew by 118,000. Missing the expectations for 136,000. And I could go on, but you get the point. Not good. Soft. Very, very soft. So that's that. Then there's this big story on the Drudge report. And I check that every day to see what the crazy left. Drudge was once a big conservative, but now every headline he's got is just so, not even like... I'm not going to say liberal or progressive. It's literally just anti-Trump. That's every major headline he puts is anti-Trump. And there's a piece in Axios called MAGA's Meltdown. Drudge had it listed. Let me see how he had it listed, because it's always so hyperbolic. I think it's at the end of MAGA. Oh, conservative media facing rare moment of introspection. I clicked on it. I figured, hey, some people consider me conservative media, part of it. Okay. So it says that the conservative media is facing a rare moment of introspection, rocked by a series of scandals. Raise your hand if you feel rocked by a series of scandals. I don't. But I found it to be so funny because this scandal has drawn scrutiny to the right's favorite influencers. Why it matters. The battle for MAGA's future is unfolding. Who says? Who is the author of this? Zachary Basu. Zachary, what type of Kool-Aid are you drinking, sir? Anyway, Zach, let's continue here. This is from Zachary Basu. The battle for MAGA's future is unfolding, just not at the ballot box, but online. Let me say something, just right there. I mean, that's just so erroneous. I'm sure this is an opinion piece and not like masquerading as straight journalism. But the battle for MAGA is not happening at the ballot box. Right? That's not the battle for, that's the battle for America. MAGA will continue. I can't think of one person, really. I can't think of one. Maybe there's some curmudgeonly malcontent people out there that'll say, oh my gosh, if Trump doesn't win, that's it. I'm never voting again. All right, so you're a pendejo. That's on you. But I don't know anybody who's saying that. I know I'm not saying that. If anything, I think if Trump loses, look what happened, right? Last time, everybody thought Trump was winning, and then all of a sudden, oh, Biden wins. What happened? MAGA grew. Right? It went from crazy Bible-thumping white people to now you got black people in the Bronx, Puerto Rican people in the Bronx, people all over the country, Puerto Rican rappers. So you tell me, if MAGA loses at the ballot box, this is concerning the future of MAGA? Come on. I mean, where are you, Zach? You should listen to the show here, and if you can, please give us a call. Because, Zach, I think you're off here. You're off on this one. And that's just the first sentence. Oh, my goodness. Let's see here. Not just at the ballot box, but online, where traditionally pro-Trump forces are suddenly feuding over anti-Semitism, revisionist history, and Russian disinformation. Where's the feud? I don't see a feud here. All right, so I take shots every now and again at those people that like to repeat the Vladimir talking points, like, when I call them pro-Putin patriots. But, I mean, that's not a feud. I don't feud over anti-Semitism. If you're an anti-Semite, that's on you. It's disgusting and it's wrong. It's like being a racist or being anything else that's, wrong. We got to call what's wrong as what it is, wrong. Revisionist history, that's a whole different story. And he's got a link. He's probably just promoting one of his articles. And then it goes on. At the center of the firestorm is Tucker Carlson, who has drawn sustained backlash for hosting a guest on his podcast who called Winston Churchill the chief villain of World War II. Now, again, I don't know Mr. Carlson. He's never been in one of my circles. But I for sure haven't heard about this. Right, so this means this is one of those Daily Kos, Daily Beast, maybe Axios type of articles that's circulating, running around the most progressive left-wing elements of the internet. And Axios is trying to parade this off as being some sort of mainstream scandal. I just don't see the scandal here. Then they go to Elon Musk. Elon Musk promoted the interview with Darryl Cooper, who Carlson suggested was the best and most honest popular historian in the U.S., then backtracked after ex-users accused Cooper of Nazi propaganda or being an apologist for the Nazis. Okay. Again, sounds like a flash in the pan to me. But it goes on. Even hardcore conservatives were gobsmacked by Carlson giving voice to Cooper, the latest in a string of controversial guests, Vladimir Putin among them, whom Carlson has interviewed since leaving Fox News. So now it's wrong for Carlson to interview Vladimir Putin. I would interview Vladimir Putin. I don't even like Vladimir Putin, but I would do it. I mean, I think that's a good look. I would get a chance to ask some questions. He'd get a chance to give some really slick responses. Whenever you ask Putin a question, he always comes back with an attack. Well, the real question is, why is it that you guys can't control things in America when you have Black Lives Matter burning buildings down in the middle of your country? Right? That's all he does. He takes shots. He takes shots so that somebody somewhere who's rooted in something that is superficial and shallow will go, yeah, oh my gosh, this guy Putin makes a point there. He doesn't make any point. You ask somebody the time, they go, I don't know. Why are you so fat? What does being fat have to do with wanting to know the time? Anyway. We continue. Let's see. MAGA, Carlson. All right, this is getting a little off track here. Anyway, the point was, then they talk about Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, Dave Rubin. All of this because of this FBI thing with Tenet Media. All I could say is, have you heard about these scandals? I've heard about Tenet Media getting some $10 million, some Russian disinformation, yada, yada, yada. And that these guys had some contracts or some marketing business with these companies. But with this particular company, it was covertly funded by Moscow. So how do these pro-Trump content creators, Tim Pool, Benny Johnson, Dave Rubin, how do they know anything about Tenet Media if it's a company based out of Tennessee and it was secretly receiving money from Moscow? What's the point here? right? If these guys got conned somehow by this whatever, are they to blame because they hired some marketing company in the digital world? These people have millions of followers. I mean, the whole thing is a stupid article. It really is. What's his name again? Zach. Everybody, let Zach Basu, if you got a chance. It says here he's on Facebook, X, LinkedIn. Read this article and let him know what you think of it, because I got to tell you, it's really poor. It really is poor. Give us a call, Zach, if you want to defend this. But I don't see a single instance here of you saying, when I reached out to Carlson, here's what he said. When I reached out to Candace Owens, here's what she said. When I reached out to some other conservative influencers, here's what they said. None of those influencers were available. And I reached out to conservative media pundit, so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And this was their reaction. I don't see any of that. I don't see how you could try to pass this off as anything. Anyway, here's the bottom line here from this piece. Look at this. Trump won't have issues turning out his base in November, regardless of the state of conservative media. Finally, a word of truth. The bigger question is, which voices will fill the vacuum when Trump is eventually gone? It's always a question, but that's not the question for Election Day. There's always been plenty of voices in the big conservative tent that is the American right, and I think there'll always be plenty of voices. Trump is obviously the biggest among them, but I don't think that's the bigger question. Bigger than who's coming out to vote in November? Like, what are you thinking, sir? Anyway, I'm done beating up Zachary Basu. I normally don't do this on the air. I usually do this before the show. But something like this, I wanted you to get an idea. This is what the Drudge Report is leading with. MAGA's media meltdown. There's no meltdown. You've got to be kidding. A meltdown when you're looking at Trump and Elon Musk doing a live stream where they break the internet, and it's, I think to date, still the largest live stream that was ever done. That's a media meltdown? That sounds like more like the equipment melted down because conservative media, MAGA media, is doing so well. The IPO of Trump's media company is doing fantastic. The IPO of Newsmax, that's coming up soon. Looks like it's going to do fantastic. You tell me, where are these large left-wing organizations? Where's Kamala Harris's media agency that's burgeoning and budding and growing? It's not. There's an entire cottage industry of conservative media that's growing. So, I don't know. I take exception to almost everything in this article. Anyway, folks, stick around. We've got a really fun interview coming up where we're going to talk about a life that was challenged by some addiction, by other challenges, and then all of a sudden, a turn for the better, a very funny turn for the better. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
My father gave me one really wise piece of advice before I got married, and it's held true for 32 years. On my wedding day, my father said to me, before you argue with your new wife, and you're going to argue with her, before you do, take some time, step back, ask yourself two questions. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Right. And then he broke down and sobbed right in front of me. I had no idea what that man was talking about. 32 years later, I can tell you this, I'm a happy, happy, happy man. I ain't been right in 12 years now.
That is our guest, and his name is comedian Jeff Allen. He's been a comedian for 5 decades. He's on tour right now. It's a tour called Are We There Yet? And he's going to tell us about it. But he's also going to tell us about his story, because while he said he's happy, and he's been happy for 12 years in that joke, and he hasn't been right in 12 years, he's also got a book, Are We There Yet? My Journey from a Messed Up to a Meaningful Life. And he wasn't always so happy. Jeff Allen, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
You bet. Well, I think this is a remarkable story. I was looking at your background and listening to your jokes, and it's fantastic. Tell me a little bit about how this started off for you, how you got into comedy, and some of the, I guess the dark beginning that is now a very bright, shining future that you have.
Well, in 1978, I don't know, it was probably before. My brother was a musician, so I was about 16. He was working a club in Chicago, and some comedians opened for him. And I thought, wow, that would be cool if you could learn how to do comedy. And it wasn't like something they set up on career day in high school. There was no comedy table. So kind of shelved it in my head. And 6 years later, I was working for a jewelry company, and somebody said, hey, let's go to the Comedy Cottage. And I said, what's that? And they said, well, these comedians get up one after another. So it was my first foray into a comedy club, and I was hooked. August of 78, I think November was the first time I stepped on stage. And that was a Thursday night. I went back Sunday for open mic, and they said, you're going to have to make some sense tonight. We're still trying to figure out what you said Thursday night. It wasn't a good night, but that was it. I got lucky. In 1980, the entire country exploded with comedy clubs. So there was more work than there was comedians. So I was able to travel around and be bad at something, make a few bucks, and learn some craft. And I had I'm an alcoholic, so I always said, if you like to sleep, get a job in a mattress factory. If you like to drink, find a job in a bar. So that's what I did. I traveled 50 weeks a year, and no responsibility whatsoever at all. I had a mattress, I think, in L.A. when I met my wife. By then I was headlining comedy clubs. That's about 7 years later. And we moved to Boston. And about a year into our marriage, I realized that one of us had to go, my wife or my drinking. So I made the decision to go to a 12-step meeting, and they told me to pray, and I said, to what? And that started me on about an 8-year journey, which was the first half of the book is that 8 years of trying to figure out what the point for me was, what meaning meant to me. Did God exist or didn't he exist? I was definitely an atheist when I got into those meetings, and then probably moved more towards agnosticism. And then I went through self-help philosophy, and eventually somebody put the Bible in my hands while I was out on the road once. And it was about a year after he gave me the Bible and signed me up for these tapes that I opened one up, and it was Ecclesiastes. And if you're not familiar with it, it's the first verse of Ecclesiastes is meaningless, all in life is meaningless. And my heart leapt. I go, yes, that's true. It sucks. I mean, that was my conclusions after 8 years of trying to figure something out, And anyway, that's set me on about a 6-month just deep dive into the Bible. And what my conclusion was, if Jesus is not who he claimed to be, then Solomon in Ecclesiastes was right, suicide. So anyway, I got on my knees and said, I'm yours. Whatever that means, whatever that looks like, I had no clue. And that was 25 years ago. So I just summed up about 12 years of my life. And
look at that. This guy has a career in radio. A gift for brevity. Yeah. Folks, we're on with comedian Jeff Allen. And we're coming right back. We're going to walk through the rest of the decades of his life and his book and, of course, his tour. Check him out at jeffallencomedy.com. Again, we're coming right back with comedian Jeff Allen. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
My father used to give my brother and I food my sisters didn't have to eat. He called it man food. It was sardines in a can. And I said, I'm not eating this. He said, it'll put hair on your chest. I'm 8 years old. That a good thing? He said, every man wants hair in his chest, boy. Really? Yeah, who knew in the 21st century all the men would be waxing all the hair off their chest? I want to meet the first man that ripped the hair out of his chest. I really do, because I'm going to punch him right in the face. In a Christian loving way, of course.
That again, folks, comedian Jeff Allen with some of that ageless, timeless wisdom from his dad. And comedian Jeff Allen, we left off with you getting into comedy, being on the road 50 weeks a year, like some of my comedian buddies are. And of course, drinking comes easy. You're working in bars, and like you put it, that's where you wanted to be. You found out that wasn't what you wanted. You gave your life to the Lord, and things changed from there. Let's pick up from there.
Yeah, we moved to, we were living in Arizona at the time. We moved to Nashville and started, I don't even know what that looked like. I think I was in Vegas working the Tropicana when 9/11 hit. And I came back and asked my Jewish manager if churches would hire me. And he looked at me and said, I have no clue, you know. So we put it out that I was ready to start working stand-up comedy in churches. And in the first year, we got one church to pony up. Apparently, when your resume is casinos and nightclubs, pastors hesitate to give you the pulpit for an hour.
Who would have thought it?
And yeah, who would have thought? Yeah. So anyway, I got hooked up with a singer named Bill Gaither. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but I had lunch with him. I came home and told my wife, I think I just had lunch with the Elton John at Gospel Music. He was packing arenas. And I had no clue who he was. I walked in. And
he plays with his whole family, right? The Gaithers?
Yeah, and he was going out with these what they call homecoming shows, and he brought back all of these old-time gospel singers that had retired for years. He gave them a second life. It was actually it was a family. It was and I was one of the only comics on the tour, and 5-hour show, maybe 4 hours in these arenas, and I do 15 minutes and sit there, and but I got a chance to watch probably one of the greatest, putting a show together, watching him every night work 4 hours of material. It was fascinating to watch. And that stamp of approval from him within that community got me up to Michigan. Michigan kept me alive for a couple of years. I got like 3 sets of wooden shoes from Holland, Michigan. And I started working the churches and the corporate, and I told my manager I'm not going back into clubs until I can draw an audience. And about 5 years ago, I did a thing called Dry Bar Comedy, and I had no clue what it was.
I think I saw that. Was that through Angel Studios? Yeah, it was fantastic.
And, oh my gosh, it changed my life. I likened it to what the Tonight Show must have been like in the 70s if Johnny Carson tapped you on the shoulder. I mean, overnight. I mean, it was one of those things. My wife was looking at the numbers. She's going 20 million, 40 million, 60 million, 100 million. I go, who's watching this stuff? And it was fun reading the comments. You know, I'm 63 years old, and people are going, where'd this guy come from?
Right.
You know, and been around since 1978.
Me too.
You know, and it was a life-changing thing. So I'm back in clubs. I'm doing theater. As a matter of fact, I'm hitting the East Coast coming up. I'm going to be in Virginia for 4 nights, and then D.C., and Maryland for a couple nights coming up.
Now, tell us about the book, right? The book is obviously the chronicle of your life. What got you interested in putting a book together? There's, I think Seinfeld wrote a book. There's a few comics that write books.
Yeah, publishers always ask, who are you writing it for? And my sons are millennials. And I wrote it for millennials. I was 31 to 38. The first half of the book is those 7 or 8 years of just searching, and I give a pretty graphic detail of what kind of husband I was. The book begins, I proposed to my wife at Cleveland Airport baggage claim because I wanted the reader to immediately fall in love with my romantic side, What's more romantic than asking your wife to marry you at a baggage claim at an airport? I tell the audience that it was an impulse, and I tell young men, if you're single, you want to do something impulsive at the airport, buy a hat. At least if it doesn't fit, you can return it. So I asked her to marry me, Cleveland Airport baggage claim, and 7 years later, we're living in Arizona. Marriage is a total mess. I find out she's in California with another man. Okay. And I call up her friend because I needed to talk to her. It was before cell phones. It was in the 90s. And I said, I need to talk to Tammy. She said, well, she's at the mall shopping. It was, really, who goes and visits a friend and goes to the mall? It was one of many red flags. So anyway, I called my credit card company and I asked, is my credit card being used at a mall? They said no, but it is at a hotel in Southern California. So I got the number of the hotel. I called it, asked for her. She picked up the phone. I said, gotcha. And I said, get home. I'm not doing this on the phone. And Rich, I'll tell you this, had she come home that night, she did not come home that night. Her friend called me a couple hours later and said she's too devastated to be in public, but she'll be home at 8 o'clock the next morning. Had she come home that night, we would not be married. You know, the Bible compares the human tongue to a rudder on a ship. And the rudder is a small part of a much larger vessel, but you steer that vessel with that small piece. And the tongue is a small part of our bodies, but we steer our lives with our tongues. We can bless, edify, and build up, or we can cut, curse, and tear down. And I would have cut, and I would have cut deep that night, and don't think we would have recovered. But and as it was, I had a night alone, and kind of did an inventory of what kind of husband I'd been over the last 8 years, and it was sobering, really sobering. I went from basically a righteous anger of how could she be doing to what she was doing to me to man, I wouldn't, what took so long? My God, I didn't blame her. I really didn't. I was a hard man to be married to. So anyway, I picked her up at the airport the next day. I walked over, and there she was, standing by baggage claim. It's amazing how our life starts and ends at baggage claim. But
that's the next book, baggage claim.
Yeah. Anyway, she braces herself, and I walk over and I kiss her on the cheek, and she says, "That's it." I go, "That's all I got left, sweetheart. We're a mess. You and I are an absolute utter mess. And if what you want is in California, I'm not going to stand in your way. But if you want our marriage to work, you have to own half of it, 50-50. If it gets 51-49, that imbalance will kill us. We'll start calling each other names, and we'll start blaming each other. So you own your half, I own my half, and if we're meant to be married, then we'll be married." And that was 30 years ago. So we're still together.
That does sound like a
yeah, it was a long. Yeah, I tell the audiences, if you can get through the first 6 chapters without killing yourself, it's an uplifting tale. It really is. but it's an honest. I mean, Tammy, I gave her the last draft. I said, you need to be okay with my version of what we went through. And she read the first 2 chapters and came out of the bedroom crying and said, I can't read anymore. We were just horrible people. And I go, well, finish the story. We turned out okay. We did. We turned out okay. And it's really just all of God's grace. For whatever reason, he kept us together. But by every metric, we should have been divorced 5 different times. But anyway, I wrote it for the millennials. I wrote it for that husband, that 40-year-old, that 35-year-old sitting on the couch at night. I mean, I know what it feels like. You check all the boxes. People would look at me and go, why are you so miserable? Hey, what are you talking about? They go, well, you got a beautiful wife, you got healthy children, you got a home, you got, you got it all. Check the boxes. Got a job you love. I loved my job. I just got to the point where I didn't feel like anything mattered. And I tell people, man, if you're in a life that's full of acrimony, wait till you get to apathy. And that's what I see today in all the young men at the airport. I just see the apathy. And it's almost toxic to me to see it because I know what that feels like. So here's a guy that puts his wife to bed, he puts his kids to bed, he goes out in the living room, he turns on ESPN or whatever, and he just sits and stares at the ceiling, And I believe this in my heart of hearts, that the devil wants you, if he can't beat you up and keep you down with your past and all the mistakes you've made, then he'll project you into the future, 5, 10, 15 years down the line, and you're going to sit there and go, is this it? Get up every day, I plod to work, I do my 8 hours, I do my 10, I go buy and that's what I would tell my wife. She'd just look at me and go, my God, there's nothing left of you. I said, well, what does it matter? Difference does it make? I get a sitcom, a movie deal, we make a lot of money, we buy a lot of nice things, they all wear out, we take it to the landfill. Everything winds up in the landfill. I don't understand what the point is, So imagine being married to that for 7 or 8 years,
Right.
And I didn't know what it was until I started reading Nietzsche and I heard the term nihilism. I go, that's it. That's what I was.
You were nihilistic.
I was nihilistic, and it was, what a terrible place to be. So anyway, that's why I wrote the first 6 chapters. But the last half of the book, is...
Well, before we get into the last half, I'm going to take a pause right here, and we'll set up the last half because you've got me hooked. I'm ready to buy 2 copies. Folks, we're on with comedian Jeff Allen. We're talking about his book, Are We There Yet? My Journey from a Messed Up to Meaningful Life. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
America, to the liberty-loving Latino, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Great to be back. I got to tell you, I've been married to my wife, Tammy, for 33 consecutive years. Just one right after another. Thank you. And when you've been with a person that long, you learn to trust their instincts. So when she said to me a while back, you need to get diagnosed now. I said, for what? I feel fine. She said, that attention deficit stuff, I know you got it, and it's driving me insane. So I said, why now? She goes, what do you mean, why now? I said, well, if I got attention deficit, I've had it for 60 years. I've had it my whole life. It's not a virus. You can't catch it on a toilet seat. It's not like you go to the bathroom in a mall and you come out 2 days later and you go, boy, I'm so distracted. Where did that come from? I don't know. So why you bothered about it now? She said, because you keep telling me you'll do things around this house and you don't do them, and it's driving me nuts. That's not attention deficit. That's passive aggressive. And I've had that for 63 years. But I honored my wife, because that's what a man does, sir. That's right, you do, right? You honor your wife. I went and got diagnosed. I spent an hour with a psychologist. After an hour, it turns out, not only do I have attention deficit, I'm also a functioning hypochondriac. Functioning, I'm not clinical. Those people are sick.
Oh, Jeff Allen, these are great clips. And, what makes it so funny, I think always, is that art imitates life so much. A big part of why I got divorced was because I got diagnosed with ADHD in my 30s. And everything made sense. I was like, that's why I didn't do this, that, and the other. And I was so distracted and would leave to do X, Y, and Z and come home doing A, B, and C. So there's always so much truth in that. But I want to pick up where you left.
One of my dearest friends went through 6 jobs and came close to losing his marriage. And he got diagnosed, like you, at 30-something. And he's been at the same bank now 20-plus years.
Things change when you figure out what the issue is.
Right. Absolutely.
So in the first segment, we talked about how you turned to alcohol and you had some issues with addiction. You turned to Jesus and life got better. But then it didn't fix everything, right? You still had trouble with your marriage. You decided to own the half of the problems that were yours, as long as she would own the half of the problems that were hers. And it was, in reality, it was, as you put it, your Ecclesiastes moment, which I think is fantastic. Meaningless, all in life is meaningless. Right. And it brings us to this juncture where you were going to give us the last half to the present. Go for it.
Well, again, the simple way to put it, I post 5 questions I go through every year in my own recovery in my own life, and the first one is what defines me, and it's a tough one. Most men, if you ask them, who are you, they'll give you a vocation. I'm a comedian, and then you go down, married, 2 kids, 4 grandchildren. And everything that you say that it's tangible and it's nice, but it's also you set yourself up to be a victim of circumstance. Every one of those things can be taken away from you. And John Paul Sartre, I think the philosopher, said that in order for something finite to have meaning, it has to be attached to something that's fixed and never changing. And so, as long as I can keep in perspective that I'm a child of God, I'm his child first and foremost, and then everything else falls under that umbrella. So that never changes. And my circumstances will change, but at least how I react to them and respond to them shouldn't. And then the next thing is, what do I value? There was so many years I valued the material, and I always came up short. I was a scorekeeper, and always coming up short and always miserable. Today I value integrity. That's when my definition is when I can integrate what I believe with how I live. And that's a hard one. And it really is. I have a high standard for that. And then what are my expectations? That's a huge one. I tell my wife constantly, if you would lower your expectations of me, you'd be a much happier woman. Believe me. You've been with me long enough to know what to expect. And then what voices do I listen to? That's a huge one, Rich. You know that. We live in a pretty noisy culture.
Yeah.
So, and I've told my children, I tell my grandchildren constantly, you live in the greatest time in the history of the world, man. That internet, you can choose what you put into your heart and soul. With the greatest minds that God ever produced, or you can sit and play Animal Farm watch TikTok videos all day. But that's your choice. So what voices do you listen to? I say garbage in, garbage out. And then the last one is the big one. Where does your hope lie? And if it lies in the next election, I think we're in trouble. So my hope lies in the fact that those words in that book are true. And if not, I'm a believer of the Pascalian wager, where Blaise Pascal, they asked him, what if you're wrong about your faith? And he said, then who's been harmed? Right. If I go through my life, Rich, and I'm a better husband for my faith, I'm a better father for my faith, I'm a better citizen to the rest of this country for my faith, I'm a better comedian at what I do for my faith. And if at the end of my life I get thrown in the dirt and I'm worm food, who's been harmed? But if I'm right and those words are true, then I get to meet my mom again, and I got a lot of apologies to make to her. A lot. I was not a very good son. So. And that's kind of the second half of the book, is setting all of that up and explaining how we're living today. We live in Nashville. We've been married 38 years. And we were 10 minutes from filing divorce papers. At one point, we had them notarized, filled out, and we're driving to the courthouse, and she changed her mind. And I think about that a lot. If I drive those last 10 minutes, I lose 30 years with a woman that I never knew, we never knew. We were both messed up people, and so we hung in there for whatever reason, and I hope it inspires people to at least give it a shot, give it a try. It's not a how-to, it's not an acronym. It's a memoir. It just explains what we were, what we've been through, and hopefully get through it. And and the comedy show is it's the highlights of all the angst of being married. I mean, we still man, we are we're. But I remember there's times like she'll walk in a room and I lose my breath at how beautiful she is, even after 38 years.
That's sweet.
And
Jeff,
and
hang on for 2 seconds. We're going to come right back. I want to make sure you have a chance to tell everybody how they could go to your shows and how they can get the book. Folks, don't go anywhere. We're coming right back with Jeff Allen.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. We continue our discussion with one of the funniest guys in America, Jeff Allen. He's a comedian. You've seen him. I've seen him. He's hysterically funny. And we're talking about his book and his tour. He's got a tour called Are We There Yet? A book by the same title, My Journey from a Messed Up to Meaningful Life. I like to say, after hearing all this, it's truly the Ecclesiastes moment at the baggage claim, right? That's a good alternative title. Jeff Allen, yeah, exactly. Let everybody know how to get your book.
You can go to Amazon. Probably that's the best thing to go, and it'll be there in a day.
And the tour.
And the tour is go to JeffAllenComedy.com, and everything is on there. If you sign up, all the icons you can click on and get onto my social media, and we post every day updates on the calendars. I'm all over the country, hitting the East Coast coming up.
Are you coming to New York?
September 20th. Not New York, but I'll be in Richmond, Virginia, and Washington D.C. and
close enough, folks. Go
Virginia
check them out. JeffAllenComedy.com. Jeff Allen, you're a gentleman, a scholar, a patriot. I love this conversation. Wish you Godspeed, sir.
Thank you much, Rich. Have a great night.
You bet. God bless. All right, folks, we're coming back. Hour number 2 is lined up, locked, loaded. Don't miss it. I'm Rich Valdez.
From the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 2 of the program. It's Friday night. We're live. We're national. And our phone number, if you want to join us, 833-482-5337, 8334-VALDEZ. And a couple of things that are going on. The jobs report, not quite what it was expected to be. Surprise, surprise. That seems to be happening more often than not, right? Sadly, that's what we expect from this current administration. We also have some fake news out there, or I should say some opinion analysis that says that MAGA is falling apart. Meanwhile, I'm looking at another poll that says Trump is up by 2. So I don't know. You gotta take everything with a grain of salt. But certain things are pretty concrete. Certain things I think are somewhat fact-based, and we know exactly what's going on. And what I mean by that is you have situations where people can try to say something and sell you an idea. But ultimately, these ideas, they're not ultimately what they're cracked up to be. For example, my least favorite congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. In the past, she's made some crazy claims, and usually they're not rooted in reality. They're rooted in her belief of Marxism, because that's the worldview that she espouses. For example, listen to this.
To me, capitalism at its core, what we're talking about when we talk about that is the absolute pursuit of profit at all human, environmental, and social cost. That is what we're really discussing. And what we're also discussing is the ability for a very small group of actual capitalists, and that is people who have so much money that their money makes money and they don't have to work. And they can control industry, they can control our energy sources, they can control our labor, they can control massive markets that they dictate and can capture governments, and they can essentially have power over the many. And to me, that is not a redeemable system for us to be able to participate in for the prosperity and peace for the vast majority of people.
Prosperity and peace. What is she talking about? This is that Marxist rhetoric that kind of gets me going. But this is why I said, you know what, we've got to talk with a pro here. And she's been saying stuff like this for years, right? AOC, all out crazy. So I want to bring in a pro, Wanjiru Njoya. She's a scholar in residence at the Mises Institute and the author of Economic Freedom and Social Justice, Redressing Historical Injustice, and a critique of equality legislation in liberal market economies. I mean, she's got quite a bit of a body of work there. And like me, she's from Jersey, but grew up in Kenya. And after graduating with a law degree from the University of Nairobi, she won a Rhodes Scholarship and studied at St. Edmund's College, Cambridge University. And her doctoral research on the conceptual framework of the employment relationship was published under the title Property in the Work, the Employment Relationship in Anglo-American Firm. I want to welcome our guest, Wanjiru Njoya. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm really glad to be here.
Likewise. I'm glad you're here. And you just heard a clip of United States Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York, and she makes this case for capitalism that I think a lot of people make, where it's constantly, I guess, being maligned one way or another. And it's my belief, and I don't know if you agree with me or disagree with me, but I believe that capitalism, or better yet, the free market economy, is truly what is the most egalitarian thing we have, right? Everybody can be equal in one way or another when you have this economic liberty to do better in life. What say you?
Oh, I agree with that. I wrote, in fact, in my article on how capitalism defeats racism, that your dollar is the same color as my dollar.
Green.
And that's what equalizes us, is that when we go on the market, nobody cares what race we are. If we have something to sell and somebody wants to buy what we've got to sell, it doesn't matter what the color of our skin is. So that's absolutely correct. I like the description you had of AOC as all out crazy, because that was really funny, because the definition she gave of capitalism was completely wrong. She said capitalism is about making profit at the cost of everybody, the cost of society, the cost of the environment. That's not what capitalism is. Capitalism is just voluntary exchange. I have something to sell and you want to buy what I'm selling. That's what capitalism is. It's got nothing to do with, making profit at any cost. And she also talked about rich people, a minority of rich people, lording it over the masses. That is not what capitalism is. It's got nothing to do with being rich. In fact, if anything, capitalism helps the poor. Capitalism has been responsible for lifting the vast majority of the world's people out of poverty. So it's got nothing to do with a few billionaires at the top.
So true. I agree with you. And you know what kills me, and again, you're a scholar in residence and a professor, so I can't blame you, because obviously your head's screwed on right. But I feel like in most of America, this problem is created and lies within academia, where you take well-intentioned young people, you send them to university, and then they come out and they sound like AOC. What's going on here?
Oh, yeah, because the academics are Marxists, same as AOC. They're Marxists. They believe that Marxism will be best for them. Academics are notorious for this, because they imagine that in the communist utopia, they will be the intellectuals. They'll be living a good life with the state will kind of have them in there to give advice. They imagine it's going to be lovely for them, and they're not bothered about anybody else. They just think the intelligentsia will get to dictate whatever we do. I mean, we saw some of this during the COVID lockdown, when you had all the scientists feeling that they were the rulers of the world and that they can tell everybody else what to do. So it's exactly the same thing going on with academics who just promote Marxist ideas because they think that's what's going to get them forward. It's a very selfish Marxism. And yes, the young people are beguiled because they tell them it'll be social justice, it'll be, equality and everybody having a fine and happy and equal life. And young people buy that because they're attracted to idealism. And reality hasn't hit them between the eyes quite yet.
Sadly. Somebody once told me, they said, it was a young person. He was, 22 years old, maybe. And he said, yeah, I was a socialist until I got my first paycheck. And then I called it quits after that. And I
Absolutely.
thought, that's how life works, right?
Absolutely. When they learn about taxes, it's all very well. Socialists never worry about how anything will be paid for. They just say we should have, we should put price caps on groceries. We should give everybody $25,000 to buy a house. We should scrap student debt. They have all these dreams and they never worry about how they're going to pay for it. They say, well, the government can print money and we don't have to worry about it, until they see the taxes hitting their paycheck, and then reality dawns on them.
Yeah, that you have to work for money. Folks, we are going to continue our conversation with Wanjiru Njoya. She is our guest. She's a scholar in residence at the Mises Institute. And we just heard from AOC All Out Crazy. Now we're going to hear from her communist sympathizing grandpa, Bernie Sanders. So stick around for that. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well,
Mr. Valdez. You have one of the greatest shows that radio has ever had.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
What is it that makes you angriest about capitalism? Because we live in a capitalistic system.
What makes me angry is the massive inequalities that exist. Look, a few blocks away from here, there are people sleeping out on the street. People are dying because they can't afford health care. And you got 3 people who own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. Nobody will ever convince me that that is morally or economically acceptable.
What do you say to the people who say that capitalism makes this the land of opportunity, and the people who have the most money have taken advantage of that opportunity?
I'm not saying that these guys are breaking the law. I'm just saying that as an American citizen, I think that massive inequality is absolutely immoral, and it's bad economics because it spills over to our political system where these guys and their super PACs are spending hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to elect people who represent the rich and the powerful. It spills over to our economy, where in sector after sector, you have a handful of large corporations controlling what goes on and engaging in a lot of price fixing.
So there you have it, Bernard Sanders and his story about price gauging. Now, price gauging, as Kamala Harris calls it, price gouging, as the rest of us call it. And what I find fascinating here is that I really don't see many instances of price gouging, period. I just don't see them often. It's not a thing. We live in a pretty competitive market where if you're price gouging, somebody's going to undercut you and steal your business. But presuming I'm wrong, I want to bring in the expert here, Wanjiru Njoya. She is a scholar in residence at the Mises Institute. And Professor, you've heard Senator Sanders here just make this diatribe that he made, anti-capitalism rant. How do you respond to that?
Right. So he was complaining about inequality and saying, oh, there are poor people on the street, they're homeless, they have no health care, and we have all these rich people. And one way that I like to respond to people who complain about inequality is to ask them the question that Thomas so often asks, which is, compared to what? I mean, it's so
right.
easy to complain about anything we see, right? Because we don't live in utopia. There's plenty that we don't like, and we might complain about it, but compared to what? So you could say we could have a communist system where we don't have inequality because everyone is equally poor. We know that this is what happens in communism because we've seen it historically. I mean, if you look at the Soviet Union, for example, nobody had health care. So that's what Bernie Sanders wants. He's unhappy that there are people without health care. Well, the alternative is that nobody has health care. The only people who had access to health care were the Communist Party leaders at the top. You know, they keep all the good things for themselves, and the masses can suffer. And they're all suffering equally, and that's supposed to be better because nobody's worse off than anybody else, and they're all equally poor. That is my answer to complaints about inequality. And you're absolutely right about price gouging. And it's partly what you've said, that a competitor would just step in if somebody's trying to make more profit than the market can sustain. But also, it's bad business. You know, if somebody has a business model where they're thinking, I'm just going to stab all my customers in the back, well, those customers aren't coming back. So why would anybody, if anybody tried running a business that way, they'd soon run out of business. Everyone's trying to give value because you want your customers to come back. So it makes no sense, this idea that you would try and profit by, in a sense, by cheating. It's in the long run, that never works. And your competitors will soon run you out of business if you tried it.
100% true. And, you know, I think we saw it so much during COVID. There were people that were price gouging on gasoline and groceries, two of the things that are being affected in large part by inflation. But during COVID, people were looking around, and in general, in life, I've always known where the cheapest gas station is. I've always known, right? Yeah. Irrespective of who was president and what the economy looked like. I think people always shop around for a deal, and I know that the local place here in my town is very, very expensive, but it's also 2 minutes from my house. So if I want to buy milk or eggs or anything, I'm going to pay 30 or 40% more, but I get it fast. If I want to pay less, I can go to a large big box supermarket. And I think people know what's available, and they do what they can, and they'll pay convenience if they feel like paying it. But when the economy contracts, people are less willing to pay more for what they could get cheaper, and then they're going to the membership warehouse and buying in bulk because it makes sense.
Absolutely, and people will change their lifestyle. They'll change their habits. They'll adjust to shortages, and that's how markets function. Everything isn't going to be the same price you expect it to be all the time. Prices can go up as well as down. And so it makes no sense. And also, one thing that people like Bernie Sanders assume is that when things are going wrong in the market, meaning going in a manner that we wouldn't like, we look at it and we say, oh, this isn't right. He assumes that government interventions will make things better, but we know from experience that government intervention makes things worse. It always ends up worse than if they have done nothing. So it's not enough to just point to problems. It's also important to think about the best solutions to them and to ask, why would anybody think that somebody like Bernie Sanders has the best solution to fix a problem, even granted that there was a problem in the first place?
Yeah, excellent point. Folks, we're on with Wanjiru Njoya. She's a scholar in residence at the Mises Institute, Ludwig von Mises. And the book that we're talking about is Economic Freedom and Social Justice. If people want to take a look at the book and learn more about your work, how do they find out more about what you're doing?
Thank you. I always ask people to go to the Mises website, mises.org. That's MISES.org. And all the articles on the topics that we're discussing are there, a lot of them that I've written and also articles my colleagues have written. And, we're talking about these sorts of debates and trying to put them in context, trying to put it in historical context and economic context, and just giving people a little bit more detail if they're trying to learn more about the topics.
Outstanding. Now, you guys at the Mises Institute, in large part, have always taken the, I would say, the libertarian perspective on economics, and it's a view that I think is popular and I share. How do you size up the 2024 election? Do you, from whichever perspective you'd like to analyze that, with about 30 seconds to go?
I think we look to the least bad option, or should I say the best option for the economy, and that would be Donald Trump. I mean, that's not to say he's perfect, and that's not to say that we like everything he's proposing, but he's clearly the better option given the two options that we're faced with.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know how anyone says, I'm going to run for president. And one of the things I'm going to talk about is going after businesses about price gouging and raising the corporate tax rate. I mean, that's just, who is her campaign manager? Anyway, I want to thank you for being with us. I really appreciate it. Wanjiru Njoya, check her out at Mises.org. She's a scholar in residence there and the author of Economic Freedom and Social Justice. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Folks, we continue with the rest of your calls, thoughts, and more, and a relative of Martin Luther King Jr.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations, handsomely. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right? But you're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Earlier this year, Ambrose King Jr. filed a petition to contest the election results for the Tift County Board of Elections District 1 representative and requested for a new election. King lost the primary election to incumbent Marilyn Burks by 2 votes. Both ran as Democrats. Tift County Superior Court Judge Howard McLean ruled that Casey's Court Apartments complex was inadvertently and incorrectly designated in District 6 when it should have been properly designated in District 1, which thereby resulted in at least 6 voters receiving an irregular ballot. Since there was no Republican contender, the winner of the next election will be appointed to the school board. The election is set for November 5th.
That is a report from WALB from Quinlan Parker. And the story here, as it was sent over to me, was that the Democrats are preventing another Democrat candidate who's running for the school board from winning, right? Because of this irregularity they just heard in the report. And True the Vote, a conservative organization, stepped in to help him clarify things. So I want to get the scoop directly from Ambrose King Jr. And as I'm told, he's a relative of Martin Luther King. Ambrose King Jr., welcome.
Thank you, Rich. It's good to be on tonight.
Thank you. My pleasure. So tell us what's going on here. You're a high school teacher. You're a candidate for Tift County School System Board in Georgia, and you get into the race. Take it from there.
Yes. I decided that as a school teacher, there's no better candidate to be on a school board than a teacher that is currently in the classroom, because the teacher has day-to-day things going on, knowing what's going on in the classroom. So I'm a longtime resident of Tift County. I've been active in almost everything in Tift County since I was a child. A lot of my relatives are school teachers. And so I said, well, I better go ahead and get in on the race when I found out my incumbent wasn't running anymore. However, later on, she decided to run. After she told me on the phone that she wasn't going to run. She also was a Democrat, and she's 75 years old. She's a retired school teacher, and she's just really not doing what needs to be done in the school system to represent that district. So therefore, I decided to run, and I started hitting all stumbling blocks in my way, as well as trying to have people qualify me at the last hour.
And obviously they did this because they were threatened by your candidacy. How did you respond to that?
Well, the first thing that happened was that some of the people started to even down at the board, the election board office, question my candidacy. Now, I have been voting in the same hometown for the last 15, 20 years. Okay. And I know, and I'm very present. I have a lot of events that is covered by the local media there every year. Almost every year, I have something for the youth, something for adults, something for cancer survivors, or those we may have even lost to cancer. So I'm constant in the community. I never left the community. So I'm like, I don't understand why you are choosing to question my residency just because I work somewhere else. So they decided that they will call a meeting the day before election. The election board, led by a Democrat, decided to call my residency into question the day before the election. And I had to leave school. I'm a teacher, 3 hours away. And so, therefore, I had to leave school in order to be present at this meeting. Because guess what? If I wouldn't have attended this hearing by the predominantly Democratic election board, they would have disqualified me.
Right, they would have thrown you off the ballot. So this is basically election interference. They're bullying you. And so you have to show up to this thing. And how does True the Vote get involved? Do you contact them? Do they contact you? How do you make that connection?
Well, I made the connection after the results. The results was that I lost by 2 votes. But
they're counting votes from something that shouldn't be counted in the district.
Right. Correct. Well, what they were doing was what ended up happening. What we found, what I found, I'm like, well, you would think that the election supervisor, again, who is a Democrat, would say, "Hey, let's see if we made a mistake. Let's go back and look and see, let's recount everything, because this thing is less than 1%. So let's see if we have it." And so she didn't do that. She went ahead and certified hurriedly. To her satisfaction, everything was final. So I had to then, because the clock starts ticking at the moment certification happens. So the day after the election, I'm calling everybody I know to say, "Hey, who can help me understand what is going on?" There's no way, when I have been told by poll workers that I won every poll, every precinct I won. So why did I lose the election? I don't understand that. And so I called a couple of people. So 2 little ladies called me, and they called me and said, "Have you ever heard True the Vote?" And I said, "No, I've never heard of that. Who's that and what is that?" They said, "Well, it's an election integrity organization that look at elections, that look at voter rolls, to try to understand, if people were illegally voting, or what happened in an election that you thought you should have won." So I was put in touch with Ms. Catherine Engelbrecht, and she began to immediately. She knew exactly what to do. I've never met a woman that knew exactly what to do after an election. She said no one could help me. Like, no one around me could help me. And she said, "Let's start pulling the voter rolls. Let's start pulling the National Change of Address, NCOA rolls. Let's start pulling the Secretary of State's the Secretary of State's, their role, where people voted, their voting role, right? The people that actually voted in my election. I didn't know those things existed. So she knew how to go find them, and she found them, and she sent them to me. So I started looking through everybody. I said, well, this person voted, this person said they voted, but they're not on this list. So I started seeing a lot of inconsistencies. So people that were on the county roll did not show up on the state roll. And some people that were on the state roll did not show up on the county certified list. It was a huge problem for me. Then what broke it was that my cousin said that she and her children tried to go vote for me, and they couldn't. But I'm like, "But you live in my district. I don't understand." They were at that apartment complex. And she said, "Well, they put me in District 6. They said I had to vote over there. I couldn't vote for you." I said, "But I campaigned over there. I don't understand how you could vote for me." So then I went back to Catherine with True the Vote, and I said, "I don't understand this." She said, "Well, we need to call Jake Evans. We need to go ahead and call Jake and see if we can get something on it."
Wow.
Yeah.
And now things are moving.
Things get to moving.
Yeah, Ambrose King, stand by. We're going to wrap up in a moment. Folks, we're on with Ambrose King Jr., candidate for Tift County school system. And again, this guy's a Democrat, ran as a Democrat, and is getting ousted by the Democrats. As people sometimes think that that's not a thing, but and this could happen in any political party, but it's very prevalent and very prominent with Democrats, where they use machine politics. And if they don't get the exact outcome they want, they will use the levers of power to push out whomever they feel like pushing out to put in the person they want to put in. And this is a clear example, as clear as day. So I want to wrap up this conversation when we come back, and then it's open phones across America. Your calls and more coming up. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night, your home for the best election coverage.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. We continue our conversation with Ambrose King Jr., as I'm told, a relative of the late Martin Luther King Jr. He's a high school teacher, candidate for Tift County school system, school board in Georgia, and ousted from the ballot by Democrats because they finagled the district to include votes from another district and enter True the Vote, a conservative election integrity organization that is trying to help him overturn this stuff. And he just won a lawsuit regarding that. Ambrose King, tell us about the lawsuit and this recent victory.
Well, the recent victory was just that, a victory. It was literally the third time in the history of Georgia that an election was overturned. It is overturned. It is very, very, very difficult to overturn an election. The case was really nail-biting because even though we had a lot of what they call irregularities, it wasn't still the nail in the coffin. We needed the nail in the coffin, so we kept looking day and night. And so we called upon Mark Davis, who's a data analyst. And Mark began to use the Google or geocoding and the coordinates of my district, in which they gave them, what you could find on the county map. And so he kind of drew out where District 1 was and the coordinates of it. And so he began to look and dig, and he could find the inconsistencies of the people that voted, but that said that they were in District 1, but they voted in District 6. And so he kept seeing voters come up with that, the inconsistency. So he was asking me with Ambrose, Tifton better than, your attorneys, and I do. So he said, well, why is District 1 people voting in District 6? I said, I don't know. He said, are you familiar with this address? So I pulled up that address, and I actually drove to Tifton to look and find that address. And lo and behold, there's a whole apartment complex literally sitting in my district. Of course, that's the same one that I canvassed earlier. And he said, but they're voting in District 6. I said, well, I don't understand that. My cousin lives here. She called me and she said that they couldn't vote for me because they had to vote in District 6. He said, well, that, according to my coordinates, is in District 1. And if they have people voting in District 6 that should be voting in District 1, then here's your smoking gun. So he was elated, he was elated to give that information to the attorneys because that was the smoking gun. That was the nail in the coffin that we was looking for because it was so important. We had all these irregularities, but there was nothing more important than that. Remember, I lost by 2 votes, less than 1%. However, I only really needed one good reason to overturn this election, which is so hard to do. And so that was what it was. So when the judge they had to do a show cause. My lawyers had to do what they call a show cause. So when they
it's an order to show cause. Mm-hmm.
Right, in order to show cause, yes. So they had to present the evidence, and they had to present what witnesses they were going to call, what exhibits they were going to use. And once they did that, the county basically caved. The county lawyers said, they said, wait a minute, if this is it, then definitely and truly, we have at least 6 voters that has been disenfranchised, and there's 139 registered voters in that complex. So that means they disenfranchised 139 voters, which they said that we would definitely concede to your petition and join you in the cause for a new election. And the judge agreed and signed a consent order to overturn the election.
Outstanding. Ambrose King, I congratulate you. I think that's fantastic. And again, thanks for clarifying that, because I said that they had included a district that was not part of the district. They excluded a district, part of the district, to make you have less votes. And that is, and I hadn't heard of that one before. But again, yet another way that those that are familiar with the machinations of how elections work better than you and me, this is how they do what they do. Outstanding. I'm glad that you won. I'm glad more than anything that this has been exposed, because sometimes people think they're stuffing the ballots. Rarely do we think maybe they're not letting enough ballots get in, ballot suppression. And that's exactly what this was. Angus King, I wish you good luck with the rest of your race and everything that you're doing, and keep having the courage to fight, because, you're in the thick of it, brother. Godspeed to you, my man.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
You bet. And before you go, I just want you to let everybody know I have Give, Send, Go, Angus King for Georgia. Is that the right place where people can go and support you?
Yeah, Give and Go. Yes, Give and Go website to definitely support the cause, because it is a new election coming up.
You got it. Well, Ambrose King Jr., again, thank you very much for spending some time with us tonight. Folks, when we come back, a few final thoughts, and then, of course, we're opening up the phone lines for open phones across America, where we're going to get your thoughts on absolutely everything that's going on. Everything's on the table. It's Friday night, so you name it, it goes. As long as we don't have to bleep it out, I'm cool with it. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
I want to address cowardice. People that want to call the show and will hold on for an hour, 2 hours, half hour, 40 minutes, whatever it is. And then when it's their chance to get on and actually talk to me, they hang up, they tuck tail, and they run away. Be a man. Be a man. It's a phone call. It's a conversation. Don't hang up because you're told you have to say it in 30 seconds. If there's only a minute left in the show, I can't give you 2 minutes to sit there and put out every platitude that you can. But you do have valuable things to say. Steve in Atlanta wanted to say, before he got scared and ran away, he wanted to say, why are young people, see, there goes the music. Why are young people so fixated on Marxism? And I was going to give him that explanation, but he was too scared to hang on. So I'll give you that explanation on the way back. Folks, stick around. Open Phone America is coming up right now, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you. 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here with you this Friday evening. We're live and national. Give me a follow if you can, at Rich Valdez with an S on all of the social media. And our phone number, if you want to join us, feel free, 833-4825-337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And let's see what's going on, right? Today's one of those recap days because there wasn't a huge news day. I mean, I guess the big story, my brother sent me a text earlier today. He says, are they trying to put Trump in jail? I was like, they've been trying to put Trump in jail for years. But I know they were actually legitimately trying, at least on this case, they were trying to figure out some sort of jail time, if they could, to try and get him sentenced to Rikers Island. Well, that has been put to bed. Judge Merchan has delayed the Trump sentencing until after the election. Now, there's still the other crazy guy, the one who loved the camera, was all smiley when the camera got in his face. We'll see what happens with that. But right now, that was the big story today. Judge Juan Merchan decided to postpone former President Trump's sentencing in New York versus Trump until after the November presidential election, which is how all these cases should have been if they were, legitimately being adjudicated. Most of them wouldn't even been brought. Trump's sentencing date is now scheduled for November 26th. The original date was September 18th. The public's confidence in the integrity of our judicial system demands a sentencing hearing that's entirely focused on the verdict of the jury and the weighing of aggravating and mitigating factors, free from distraction or distortion, Merchan said in a letter on Friday. Why didn't you say that when you took this case and decided to drag the president through the mud, per se, all these months? That's the duplicity here that I think really ticks a lot of people off. Anyway, he goes on to say, unfortunately, we are now at a place in time that is fraught with complexities, rendering the requirements of a sentencing hearing should one be necessary, difficult to execute. Thus, in accordance with certain of the grounds submitted by defendant and the reasons for adjournment provided by the people, coupled with the unique time frame this matter currently finds itself in, the decision on the motion and the imposition of the sentence will be adjourned to avoid any appearance, however unwarranted, that the proceeding has been affected by or seeks to affect the approaching presidential election in which the defendant is a candidate, said Merchan. Imagine that same logic being applied that we were in an election year and the fact they could have brought these cases so many years earlier. But anyway, Trump was found guilty in an unprecedented criminal trial on all 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. Right? The same record, they just counted it 34 times, following a 6-week trial stemming from Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's investigation. Trump campaign spokesperson Stephen Chung told Fox News that there should be no sentencing in the Manhattan DA's election interference witch hunt as mandated by the United States Supreme Court. This case, along with all of the other Harris-Biden hoaxes, should be dismissed. I tend to agree with that. I think they shouldn't have been brought, is really what I think. Trump's initial sentencing was set for July 11th, 7/11. That was a big date. All the QAnon people, if there's any of you listening, write this down. Q was wrong. And it was set for July 11th, 7/11. That was a big thing running around the internet, and all the conspiracy folks were going nuts about it. Just days before the Republican National Convention, which I remember at the time, I have some people in my circle that always send me the QAnon stuff, and they were like, oh, there's not going to be a Republican convention. Watch. There was. It was very nice, too. The latest one I hear is that there's not going to be an election. There will be no election. And you just have to stop and think for a second and say, who benefits if there's no election? The Americans or our enemies? Exactly. So who do you think is spreading those rumors? Who's putting out that propaganda on websites? Look, and I'm all about free speech. I don't call for anybody to limit people's speech. But I got to tell you, because we've come to a place where critical thinking is so lacking, false equivalencies are things that people don't even give consideration to anymore. They just take them as fact. That websites like one that I'm going to share with you, and not for the sake that it gets a lot of traffic, but it's likely going to get some after I mention it. But it's called beforeitsnews.com. I urge you not to go there. This thing is filled with half-truths, right? They'll put two words that are true and fill it with 5 that are false. That's all they do. And there's barely any articles on here because they don't want you to read. They just want you to watch their emotionally charged videos as they feed you propaganda. Almost everything is about buying physical gold, which there's nothing wrong with that. I think everybody should have some. And about somehow destroying the United States so we can rebuild it again. Yeah, just imagine. Just imagine doing that to something that you love. Oh, I love my house. Yeah, so I'm going to knock the whole thing down. No, I'm not going to renovate. No, I'm just knocking it down. I love my wife. I'm going to destroy my wife. Yeah, and then we're going to rebuild her. Nobody does that to the people that they love, to the things that they love. So there's no reason to do that to the America that we love, right? Yesterday, I thought it was really nice. President Trump was at the Economic Forum in New York and at the New York Economic Club. And in this forum, he decided to talk about the dollar. Right, and one of the questions was about the dollar. We don't have audio on this, but I remember listening to it, and he made such a defense of the dollar. And meanwhile, I've got, not many, but a handful of people that contact me. They send me messages on Instagram, Facebook, or whatever, and they're always saying, you know what? Trump is going to back BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, Saudi Arabia, or South Africa, rather. And Saudi Arabia, I think they're in it too. But he's going to back the BRICS consortium to have a gold-backed currency. And I'm not going to rule it out. I mean, I think if that were ever to become the main currency, I would hope whoever is our president would say, listen, we're going to make that the United States brick. And, we're putting us at the beginning, and we're going to continue to be the global leader. Of course, that likely won't happen because why? Because if BRICS succeeds, that means the dollar has failed. And that means the dollar and whoever the leader of our country is at that time won't have any bargaining power. Now, that's not what Trump said. Trump got in there in front of a bunch of financial gurus, economists, reporters, and he basically said, we're going to strengthen the dollar, and the dollar's still strong, and we're going to make it even stronger. And he didn't talk about abandoning ship, abandoning the dollar at all. There wasn't any talk of that. But yet, you go to these websites and some of these podcasts, very popular podcasts, people that go by just their first name. You don't know who these people are, and they give all this information. Some of them make 2 shows a day. Lots of listeners. Half of what they tell you is true. The other half, pure fantasy, pure fiction. And I think that's what people like, right? Radio is about entertaining and being informative. I try to give you information, my opinion on what's really happening, right? There's really a presidential election. It's really happening on the 5th. Whether you agree with my position or not is irrespective of the outcome here. The outcome is we're talking about reality, and we're giving opinions on reality. But on these websites, some of these websites, they give opinions on things that are just not real. And those that defend that stuff will just sit there and say, well, how do you know it's not real? How do you know we're going to have an election? What are you, a fortune teller? I turn to you and say, how do you know we're not? I'll tell you what I'm basing my idea off of. My idea comes from, 248 years of tradition. The fact that the Constitution says we're going to have the election on that first Tuesday in November, that's where I'm getting my information. Where are you getting yours? The fact that Election Day is not one election, it's like 3,000 elections for each county in America. So even if you hacked half the country, you'd still have half the country having elections. It's not going to happen. We were having elections before we had electronic voting machines. Right? So it's a non-starter. We've had elections during the Civil War. We've had elections during COVID. That was probably the biggest obstacle. So I say all of that. I'm getting sidetracked here. But I say all of that to say, if you're one of these people that believes in these things, that believes in the Gitmo and people are going to hang and the gallows and all this crazy stuff and all this treason talk, God bless you. Godspeed to you. Try to listen to the show a little more. Not because I think I'm right, but I do. But because we bring in a lot of guests. Some I agree with, some I don't. But nonetheless, you're going to hear what they have to say. And nobody's talking about those things. There is no secret presidency of President Trump. It's another one I hear. President Trump's currently still the president, and the United States military is running everything. What? Since when is the United States a military junta? And that's the last thing I want us to be. So sometimes our lack of history, our lack of historical analysis, our lack of critical thinking just allows us to believe things we want to hear. We want to hear that, Joe Biden's a robot, a cyborg, an android, an actor. He's wearing a latex mask, this, that, and the third. There's 14 clones of him. These things are sexy, attractive, and funny. People like entertainment. But the reality is Joe Biden's just had more plastic surgery than I don't know, who has a lot of plastic surgery? Nancy Pelosi. And that's really the case, We're like, oh, he didn't look like that 10 years ago. Yeah, neither did she, right? They keep stretching this guy out. That's why he's got one eye that's bigger than the other. They keep stretching him out. Anyway, I'm going to get to your calls in a moment. I see Steve called back. That's nice. Good. I'm glad you called back, Steve. And I see we got calls from New York, calls from Pittsburgh, Santa Fe, Delaware, Idaho, and our buddy Gil from the Philippines. Hang on, folks. We're coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Congratulations on just an amazing show. I know you've worked so hard in the industry and nobody deserves it more than you do. So I'm happy to see you really succeeding here. It's awesome.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
An economy in crisis, a failing nation, a nation in serious decline under the radical policies of my former opponent, Joe Biden, and my new opponent, Kamala Harris. 1.3 million workers have become unemployed in the past 12 months. I don't know if anybody knows that. The typical American family has lost over $28,000 due to rampant and record-setting inflation. Credit card debt has reached the highest in history, with more than 1 in 3 Americans reporting they have maxed out their credit cards. They've maxed out. Families now need to earn an estimated $110,000 a year to afford a typical home, meaning 65% of households are locked out of buying just an ordinary house. Gasoline prices, grocery prices, electricity prices, mortgage rates, and virtually everything else are up 30 to 100% since I left office.
That is President Trump talking about the economic crisis. He gave a speech yesterday at the New York Economic Club, and I think he's spot on. And you've got all this talk about capitalism and socialism, and Kamala Harris with all of her communist sympathizing policies that are just not going to bode well for America. But I want to go to Tony. He's in Albany, New York, WGDJ. Tony, go right ahead.
Yes, Tom. Not Tony, it's Tom.
Oh, excuse me, Tom. Go right ahead.
Yeah, how you doing? I just want to say the Democrats, they need a lesson in economics. A lot of us capitalists, we're giving to charities that are keeping some of these other countries going. you know,
Yeah.
and
like our tax dollars are. It's the latest charity, right? The clearinghouse in Washington that's doing so much, whether it's funding gender studies in Afghanistan and all the other charitable work they do on our dime. But I know what you're saying. You're talking about real charities. I just think it's interesting how they're doing so much with our money, and we're doing so much more with our own money.
yeah. First of all, capitalism gives us incentive to work. Period.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, like my age now, I'm about 65, and my wife passed away, but
I'm sorry to hear that.
I work the reason I work is so I can give, you know, and these young people just don't get it, you know, they don't get it. We still have an incentive to work to give, you know. There's a lot of people that want to give. Usually it's the people that work hard that save their money, they give to other people. Now, if we go with socialism, that means the government's going to decide who they're going to give our money to.
I think you're right, Tom. They're always going to decide, and that's why I like to do my own deciding, right, where I'm going to give my money away. Very good point. Capitalism does give us the incentive to work. Thank you, Tom, in Albany, New York, WGDJ. Let's continue. Let's go to our buddy Steve in Atlanta. He called back. Steve, go ahead. WGKA.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Mr. Valdez.
You got it.
Hey, so first I want to say Ambrose King Jr. is he's a Democrat, and that's awesome that they did what they did for him. It's awesome. It's very awesome. And I gave him. I started giving him tonight $10 a month, monthly donation to True the Vote. And if everyone isn't aware, True the Vote is behind the 2000 Mules documentary.
Yep.
Aren't they the ones who are responsible for that?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Yep, they've invested a lot of money in that, and so thank you to them. And I want to say to you, Rich, that you are a brilliant broadcaster, and I put you on the level of Bongino. I really, truly feel this way. You're on the level of Bongino and Beck. You really, truly are.
Thanks.
And I hope you receive all the success that you deserve, because you're brilliant. You are brilliant. And thank you for being on, you know, at night with the rest of us out here in America and the lands beyond, in the place of Bohannon.
Amen to that. Now, Steve, I don't want to run out of time, but I know you wanted to say something about young people and socialism. Go right ahead.
Yeah. So I would have liked to have gotten the perspective of the professor, but I couldn't get on, right?
Sure.
But so now I've got you, and you're a brilliant mind. So what do you think it is? And I have a theory.
What's your theory?
Children grow up with a parent and two parents most of the time who just give them everything and, you know, provide. I do it for my own sons, right? And you've done it for your children too. So what do you think is do you think...
Right, I get what you're saying. So you're saying because we provide for our children grow up not wanting to provide for themselves, but looking for someone to provide for them. And I would say that is the flaw in our parenting, right? If we raise kids that are looking for someone to do for them instead of doing for themselves, we messed up as parents. But I think it's more to that, and it's happening at the university level. Steve, I'll be right back.
Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Donald Trump and his allies, they talk a good game about freedom, right? They cloak themselves in the blanket of freedom while they're ripping away our fundamental freedoms, including the freedom for millions of women across this country to be able to just make decisions over their own body. I think the Democratic Party and Kamala Harris are the party of freedom. In Pennsylvania, we work to protect freedom. And I'm grateful to my wife for challenging me.
The gun
that
lobby
day.
feels that their freedom is to own an AR-15. How do you answer their freedom requests?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there is a way to protect the Second Amendment rights. And look, the rich heritage we have around hunting and family time in Pennsylvania, and also make sure a kid can go to school without getting shot.
Yeah.
A kid can walk to and from school without getting shot.
That's Josh Shapiro speaking out of both sides of his mouth. I got to say something here. Number one, before I get into his little diatribe on freedom, most kids go to school and don't get shot. Just want that's a fact. You can research it up, down, sideways, left, right, any way you like. Most kids go to school without getting shot. Now, some smart guy's going to say, but Rich, what about the kids that do get shot? Look, I feel badly about that. I do. But I'm not going to sit here and allow this man or any other person to come and reframe reality as if somehow my children are in danger of being shot because they exist, are in danger of being shot because they show up at a school. The reality of life is that we can get hit by a bus. We can get hit by lightning. We can get hit by a lot of things. And those are parts of the ugliness of life. If I were to sip the Kool-Aid that Governor Shapiro is pouring, just imagine. I would be saying things like, that's it, got to pull my kids out of school because they might get shot. You want to buy your kid a bulletproof book bag? Go right ahead. You want to take your kid out of school? Go right ahead. Listen, my kids, I saw how the school system was changing when my kids were growing up, and I did not want them there. But it wasn't because I was afraid of what would happen. It was because I didn't like what was happening, and I wanted to counter it. And ultimately, I didn't do anything. My kids stayed in public school. They heard, they saw, they came back, they told me, can you believe they do this? Did you hear what they're doing? This is what they're doing. And, we talked about it and we got through it. And they have their opinions, I have my opinions, and thank God they're okay. There's a concern, sure, and every parent should be concerned. I think every parent is concerned, right? After Columbine, whether it happened once after Columbine or 10 times after Columbine, after seeing the what's his name again? Michael Moore film, Bowling for Columbine, you never look at those things again the same way, right? So it's always a consideration. I'm always thinking about what they might do to my kids somewhere. It's not living in fear, it's being cautious. So listen, I get it, but we're not going to reframe reality here and say that, every kid deserves the ability to go to school without getting shot. Of course they do, idiot. Nobody's saying that they do. Every single child has that right. Nobody's taken away that right because some kid named Cole, whatever his name is, this shooter in Georgia, he took that right away from those kids that he killed and those two teachers. And that's unfortunate. And it's horrible. But that doesn't change the rights of every other kid to learn. How do you get from A to B here? That's the problem with this logic. And we can't allow our emotions to be overcome this way. If anything, get angry at this guy because he's lying to you and he's trying to manipulate you. Now, when he says Pennsylvania's the land of freedom, I'm going to agree with a lot of that. You know what you're allowed to do in Pennsylvania that you can't do in a lot of other states, at least in this area, in the East Coast? You can have, I think it's 30 rounds in a magazine. 30-round clip. That's a lot more than you can have in Jersey. In Jersey, they went down, I believe it was from 15 to 10. And that's it. You're limited there. You got more freedom in Pennsylvania. You do. My family has a farm out there. There's one sheriff in the entire county. There's no deputies. Just one sheriff. So what do you think people do? People are armed, and they protect themselves, right? These are dirt roads, gravel roads. This is not, the big city. About a half hour from Scranton. So my point is that when you hear Governor Shapiro talking about these things, and then Whoopi Goldberg chimes in and says, well, they think they have the freedom to own an AR-15. They absolutely do. Why wouldn't they have the right to own an AR-15? If you don't want one, don't get one. You don't like it, don't carry it. It's that simple. I'm so tired. I really am. This is why I don't talk about this a lot, because it really gets me fired up, because it's nonsensical. It just is. People aren't thinking. If I have one gun, if I have 100 guns in my house, and I'm not a school shooter, and I am not a thief, and I am not a criminal, and I'm obeying the law, I can own a home, I can own a car, I can own guns. I own hats, have a gold chain, I have shoes, I have sandals, I have lots of belongings. I'm allowed to own things. And somehow, because I'm exercising my right, somehow infringes upon you. What I eat will never make you fat. Don't forget it. Let's go to the calls. There was a call here that I wanted to go to. Where was it? It was about... Hang on. Bear with me. I don't think it's here anymore. All right, let's go to Lance, Kalispell, Montana, KOFI. Go right ahead.
Good evening, Rich. Hey, I wanted to compliment you on your exemplary fill-in for Mr. Levin the other evening. I was quite impressed. I was going to
different format, right? No guests, so I had to do a lot more talking than I do here, but I appreciate it.
Yes, but your time as Mr. Call Screener exemplar, kind of, I believe, prepared you well for that. But I was going to speak to down-ballot voting and how important Senate and Congress races are, but with what you were just speaking about, Second Amendment and things like that, I mean, I live in Montana. We've got one of the smallest populations, but by volumes have one of the highest per capita gun and ammo ownership rates, with some of the most, constitutional laws that allow us to possess such items. And we have one of the lowest rates of crime with weapons here anywhere, per capita. I mean, obviously small population, but, it's a huge deterrent. We don't have these massive gun-free zones where you see a lot of this taking place, these blue gun-free zones where everybody's so over-regulated and over-permitted, nobody gets one, that it seems like they create their own targets by their own regulations. And where we have the freedom to exercise this amendment, it makes people think seriously twice and three times before they, go off on this tangent.
Yeah, listen, I think you're spot on. Growing up, there was a saying on the street, right? And I didn't grow up in the streets, but it was Brooklyn. It's a concrete jungle. There was one playground in the school, and it was all concrete. And one of the sayings was, "Don't start none, and there won't be none." And I've lived by this rule, right? Don't start none, and there won't be none. This is the reality of life. Democrats seem to always want to start something, and then when they find it, they complain and they don't like it. But this is what you're talking about. You're talking about an armed society being a polite society. And I see the same in my brother's farm, which is, not Montana, but similar type of deal up in the mountains, in the Pocono Mountains. There's not a lot of people there. It's a very small population, and I think it's Clinton County, and or Clinton Township within whatever county. And there's just not a lot of people. There's not a lot of people. There's some bears, there's some deer, that type of thing. And that's what happens. I mean, Wyoming's half the population of Montana. Same thing, right? There's a lot of guns over there. There's a lot of people. You don't have this massive amount of crime like you see coming out of New York or coming out of L.A. or these popular urban centers with Democrat policies. And for anybody to turn a blind eye to those things, saying that those things don't matter, you're nuts, right? You just hands down, you can't make this argument about guns, and guns are evil and guns are bad and kids have a right to go to school without getting shot. Yeah, sure. I'm pretty sure every kid in Wyoming has the right to go to school without getting shot, just like everywhere else. That's not what's up for debate. Every kid has this right. If you want to protect that kid's right, make sure that these lunatics don't go and shoot schools. Maybe protecting the school a little bit better. Right? I agree with this. I do take exception to the idea that, little kids growing up and having to go through metal detectors and bulletproof glass and maybe seeing armed guards might affect some of their sensibilities in kindergarten. I understand. I'm sensitive to that. But at the same time, I am going to say, I want my kid protected more than whatever's in my safety deposit box. If certain banks can have armed guards and bulletproof glass, these are things that we should consider having. Anything that is a target needs to be either a hard target, if it's a soft target, or strengthened one way or another. And that's just the bottom line, right? So I think we have to be smart. Doesn't mean build a fortress everywhere, but it means to be smart. And I think people, we don't want to see more repeats of these horrible incidents that we've seen. Lance, excellent point. Thank you for your call. Thank you for your compliment, by the way. And I can't take that on my own. You're right. I had some great training and whatnot. But working with the team at Mark's show is fantastic. And it really is a team sport. So I appreciate your compliment and compliment them as well. Lance in Kalispell, Montana, KOFI. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue with Open Phone America, where you guys get to weigh in. The phone number, of course, 833-482-5337-833-4-Valdez. We are jam-packed on the phone lines. It's a Freaky Friday, so we're going to get to your calls. We're going to do 2 rounds of the speed round to make sure everybody gets in. I want to go to Ozark, Alabama, WDBT. Let's check in with Rob. Rob, welcome. You're on with Rich Valdez. Go right ahead.
Hi, Rich. I wanted to bring up the fact that neither Kamala or Trump hasn't mentioned anything about student loan rates. We're all about CDs and saving money, but my wife, she's 41 years old, going back to school for nursing, and the school she's going to, well, one, it doesn't even accept federal student loans, which I don't understand at all. But you can do a FAFSA with them, and you can do the free money if you qualify for based on your income, but that you can't get a federal student loan. Although Sally Mae can write you a loan for over 15%. And yeah. I'm not one for taking handouts from government, but I think the government could do better than 15% for people, for working class people wanting to go back.
Sure.
To school.
Well, Rob, I worked in higher ed for a little while. I'm going to explain to you what's likely happening. Does your wife already have a bachelor's degree in some other area?
No, sir. She started school 20 years ago and dropped out, never went back. And
typically,
she's back at it now for nursing, and she's doing awesome right now. But, I mean, we're having to scrounge and work. I'm having to work extra and spend savings. And
yeah. Well, listen, I'm going to tell you 2 things. One of them is what you're describing sounds inaccurate. I would suspect that they're probably already tapping into the federal student loans. And on top of that, because there's an overage, because the tuition's so high, they're doing a secondary loan to cover what's left over through Sally Mae. And people who don't take loans, period. It's not like they're going to take Sally Mae over the government loan. If they can take the government loan, they're going to take it. If you can't take it, you won't take it, right? So that's likely the case there. Now, the second thing here is the reality. There's a certain reality right now with higher education that the cost of pursuing higher education, I believe, has already reached and surpassed the point of diminishing returns. And there's only a few career fields left where you can potentially still make it, right? So, for example, your wife is likely in one, right? She can probably make enough money as a nurse once she gets a BSN, Bachelor of Science in Nursing. Once she has that with her RN license from whichever state she's going to get it in, she can likely make enough money to make sense of the investment for the degree. However, most other career fields outside of engineering and sciences like nursing and things like that, you're at a wash. You're losing. It's going to take you forever to pay it back. It's going to cost you a fortune. It's going to delay your ability to buy your home. It's going to put you in debt, and it's not going to pay off. And but for the fact that she's going into nursing, that might be the saving grace that, eventually in 3, 4, 5 years, she can probably make $150K a year or more, which is going to be helpful in paying that back. The ability to earn that kind of income with a BA degree in many other areas that are not the STEM areas, likely never going to happen, because the cost of higher education has already reached that point where it just doesn't make sense anymore. It doesn't make sense for you to get a degree in English. What are you going to do with it? Unless you're going to law school to become a lawyer, it's not going to work for you unless you become a teacher in a very desirable area or a very undesirable area where there maybe is a extra pay for going into teaching in that area. It's in a tough place. I think we're going to see a little bit of a reprieve. I think a lot of schools, and many have already frozen their tuition and are refusing to raise rates, but others, the ones that don't, they're going to die. They're going to die on the vine. We're going to see a lot of schools close in the next, I'd say, 5 years, maybe 10 years. And eventually, you're going to start to see the market correct itself because people are going to say, you know what? Okay, I might pay that to go to Harvard. I might pay that to go to Yale, but I'm not paying that to go to the University of State, whatever, or X, Y, and Z university. It's not worth it. Doesn't make sense. So people are going to stop going, and that's already happening. I think we're at 4 years in a row of slow enrollment. Now they're going to keep saying COVID, but the reality is it's money, money, money. With inflation coming in, people, like you just said, you want to support your wife's career, and look at where you are. You're borrowing money. You're doing extra work. You're doing what you got to do. That's what a real man does. God bless you. Godspeed. But the point is, not everybody can do it. Not everybody has the resources. Not everybody's married and has a supportive husband. So I think people are going to realize they're getting priced out of the market when it comes to higher ed, and less people are doing it. Every single one of my neighbors, their kids have gone into one of the trades, electrician, plumbing, that type of thing. Why? Because it makes the most sense. Rob in Ozark, Alabama, WDBT, thanks for the call. Folks, speed round when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, folks, it's the speed round, so forgive me if I'm brief with you, but I want to go to Danny, Rolla, Missouri. Your thoughts on Merrick Garland and Russian influence. Go ahead. KTTR.
He made a speech earlier this week decrying that, which kind of harkens back to Russia collusion and stuff in the past. However, the Biden-Harris administration has allowed 21 million illegal immigrants who are not citizens.
Right. They're marching right across the border, and there's no influence from that, right? Not like any of them are going to vote or put any danger into the country. 100% right. Excellent point, Danny. In Rolla, Missouri, KTTR. I think you're right. Merrick Garland is full of it. Let's go to Brute, Albany, New York, WGDJ. What's your theory on the school shooting? Quickly.
No, Rich, it's Brute. It's not Brute.
Oh, okay. I say it in Spanish. It's Brute.
Oh, okay. Okay, as long as it means brute. Okay, so listen, with all the shootings that have been going on since, the 80s, I believe there is a common denominator. I call it the marijuana massacres. I think what they got to do is go all the way back when these shootings occurred, the massacres, and ask one question. Was the shooter a marijuana user?
Was he a marijuana user? That's interesting. I know one of the things I've seen a lot is that a lot of them were on antidepressants, so there might be a correlation there. Thank you. Brute, also known as Brute, WGDJ. And Carolyn in Pittsburgh says the Dems keep lying about what Trump says. This is exactly what they do, Carolyn. It's what they do best. Andrew in Clinton, Illinois, WHOW, he says, what strategy should Trump use for the debate? He should sit back, relax, and chill. Hasta la próxima. I'm Rich Valdez.